All righty. Welcome, everyone. This is Stories on Stage. I'm Dorothy Rice with Staats, and today we're going to be talking with Bill Pieper about his new short story collection, Borders and Boundaries, and other things, I'm sure, because Bill has written a lot. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sue to introduce Bill, and then we'll get into some conversation. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Dorothy. Gosh, this is fun to do this. Although, it's tough for everybody introducing a book during this time when we're all trying to stay safe and not expose ourselves to too many people. That means that people can't go to bookstores and they can't go to, or they're starting to, but they haven't been able to. And people who are launching books don't get to do those readings. So what we're trying to do, right, is sort of, make it possible for people who love books and love to see what new authors are doing and what's going on with their books are not new, but the established authors are doing, what they're doing and what books are out there. So today I am completely thrilled to introduce Bill Pieper, who is the author of this newly released book, Borders and Boundaries, which Dorothy just showed you, and who is a very prolific author. He has, when I looked it up, Bill, it looks like at least 8 published books since 2000 anyway. Starting with what was the first one? Fool Me Once. It was So Trust Me. Yeah. In the year 2000. So you've had a lot of books published, but and a lot of accolades about them. You were nominated for pushcart prizes. You've won competitions for short story competitions. You're a notable alumna as the community of writers at Squaw Valley. So you've had your work read twice, at least at Stories on Stage, Sacramento, yeah. Right? And maybe twice at Stories on Stage, Davis. And so you are what they call prolific. Let me read a little more about you. You are a self-proclaimed desert rat, a Sierra rat, and a Pacific Crest trail hiker. You recently returned from Guatemala, where you have yet another piece of writing in your prolific career called Guatemala Triptych. But that's not what we're talking about today. We'll be talking about Borders and Boundaries. You're a notable alumnus, as I said. You have 2 novels in print. This was published by Cold River Press, which is a local publisher who has published a number of quite a bit of your work, and does a lot for the Poetry Center as well. So we need to give them a shout out because they're really a terrific press.
It was my good fortune to have a few things published in Primal Urge magazine, which was around for 20 or 25 years, also published by Cold River Press.
Oh, really? Right.
So that brought me to their attention. They published primarily poetry, but for some reason they liked my stuff. So they both particularly liked my stuff, and who am I to say no? So we've had a wonderful partnership over the last couple of books.
Yeah. Maybe it's the poetry that is actually just all through your work and the beautiful descriptions you have. Before we get into Borders and Boundaries, one of the things I was curious about as I read this book was, why this title? I said, isn't a border and a boundary the same thing? Well, as you read the book, you find out clearly it's not. So I wanted to read the prologue before I asked Bill my first question, which is basically, what was the spark that started this all out? So let me read the prologue, and then Bill, if you could get us started with sort of how this whole thing was born, okay?
Sure.
Prologue. These 10 linked stories amount to a novel embedded in the regions spanning rural Northern California, Northern Nevada, and Northeastern California. It's 2018 there, but many of the old ways and attitudes survive, along with maps showing arbitrary borders and boundaries. The state line itself was in dispute until settled by the Supreme Court in 1980. And even now, absent a fence or road marker, differences in the sagebrush flats on one side versus the other are indistinguishable. The wild horses, jackrabbits, and deer couldn't care less, nor do the people really. By tradition, it's a land of the in-between, a land for shape-shifting.
Well, you know what occurs in the middle of that region, by the way, is Burning Man.
Yes, you mentioned that several times. You mentioned, I've been up in that. I've been up in that piece of the world, and I have to say, reading these stories is just, yes, I've been there. So it just rings really true. It's one of the most beautiful parts of all the stories is how you just really bring the landscape to life. But I really want to know what the initial spark was for this whole collection.
Well, I think it's true of all my work. I'm a place guy. I find that I can't start writing a story, even if I have the characters and plot well in hand, if I don't envision pretty clearly where it's going to take place, because then everything else shades into view for me, in my head. And that is true for this area as well. I wrote the second story first, the one called Never Ever, which actually I had in a workshop in 2013 where you and I met, Sue, and that story was really panned by the instructor at the workshop. And I was a little despairing, but I thought the germ of it was good, and I wasn't prepared to give up. The following summer, then I went back to Squaw Valley just to take part in some of the public events and visit some friends old friends on faculty and students that were back again after I had attended in 210. And I happened to sit in the lobby next to Ron Carlson. And he was extremely accommodating, a wonderful writer, particularly of short stories. And he was very, very accommodating. And so I had talked to him about what he was working on. He was courteous enough to ask me the same question. And I said, I'm banging my head over this story. So what's the problem? So he actually outlined how I could fix it. And within a matter of 6 months, it was published. So
I know.
That's right. Just go figure. It was just all chance. And to me, that was a standalone story. And then the other story that I wrote next was the one that is the first story, Wildflower Season, which was just an idea I'd had in mind for a long time. But this first story, I set it in Quincy because I wanted a small town setting. Yeah, the story that I wrote first, Never Ever. Just thought that the dilemma would play better in a small town. And then, I got the idea that the Wildflower Season story would be in Nevada, and I've been fascinated by the Ruby Mountains, which are this isolated but really gorgeous chain of high peaks that are over by Elko. So I thought I'll set the story there. And the people in my writing group, particularly the women, loved the character of Cass. Oh, no, you have to bring her back. You can't, no, we're not done with Cass. You have to bring her back. And of course, my thought, being the sort of contrarian I am, is, oh, no, I don't have to.
Tell me what to do. Right.
We are God to our characters.
Yes, we are.
Don't have to bring it. But, then I got writing the third story, the one that I will read from. And by golly, toward the end, I needed a female character exactly like Cass. And so I thought, I am going to bring her back. What do you know? And there, the idea then gelled for this overall collection. That this region was under-chronicled, had a lot of colorful, quirky details. I knew it reasonably well from banging around out in the desert and stuff over the years. I lived in Downeyville in Sierra County.
Did you? Yeah.
So I just thought, well, I'm just going to go for it. And the borders and boundaries, the title idea didn't evolve until late in the game. When I realized that borders are really usually pretty well defined. They're on maps. They're legally enforceable and all the rest. Boundaries are less formal and also describe an internal state. We have our boundaries as to what we will do or what we don't do or what we're comfortable with or what we're not. So I just thought I'd play with that idea.
Yeah. Well, every single one of the characters in this collection, in these stories, it does link together amazingly in ways that you don't expect. I also think that bringing together sites as divergent and as far away from each other as the Ruby Mountains and Quincy was pretty remarkable, and so that was amazing. We start out with Cass, who is a strong woman who's on her own and has secrets, and another woman, an older woman in the first story, who was an attorney and is being sort of shoveled under the rug in her job as the county county council, right?
She was the county council.
And so we have that set up, and then we have we have men. We have two of the main men in this story, Wes and Mike, and they come up in the third story, which is called Up on Mineral Creek, and I loved how you introduced them to us. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about these two characters and maybe read a little bit from that chapter.
Well, these two characters are based on real people that I have known over the course of my life who did in life have an interaction something like this. I wasn't present. I was told about it. But it's highly embellished for the purposes of the story.
Aren't they all, Bill?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And, many times my characters are pastiches of many traits of many people. We writers are terrible voyeurs and terrible eavesdroppers. I mean, where else do we get our stuff? So, those two characters were easy for me, not totally invented. And most of the characters, in a way, are either drawn from somebody from some other context of my life that seemed to be a good fit here. That would be true of the attorney Joe Walcott and the sort of ne'er-do-well junkie Clay, who figures in some of the stories later on. I've managed to know a lot of these crazy people.
So, were you gonna, if you could read something from that chapter Up on Mineral Creek, anywhere you want, that sort of introduces us to these two characters and gives us a little bit gives a little hint of what might be to come.
Okay,
right?
Well, you can give me a hand signal when you think we should turn to other things. But
okay, sure.
I'll be happy to read from Up on.
Okay, if you would.
So, as I say, this is the third story in a 10-story sequence.
Okay.
It begins like this. His leg hurt, right around the knee where he'd taken shrapnel in Vietnam. Never been good since then, either. 50 years now, walking with a pigeon toe hitch in his gait. And always achy when he sat. But this hurt worse, because he was tied to a chair and couldn't move or stretch, and with a rolled up sock in his mouth under a layer of duct tape, couldn't yell for help. Besides, there was no one to yell to. It was a kitchen chair in his own house, and all Wes could do was wait for goddamn Mike to call the sheriff, like he'd promised. Eventually, he would, too. In one package, the guy could be the best you'd ever meet or the biggest hardhead you wish you hadn't. But God, how Shar had loved him, as if he was the son she and Wes lost years ago in that stillbirth. And this kitchen was really hers. Wes had just been the helper in here, and out the big window, her bird feeder, busy in the golden October light. She was gone 14 months now from a sudden stroke, and still owned his thoughts, night or day. His leg spasmed again. Crap! Almost 1 o'clock. He'd been tied like this since 9:30, and it hurt like hell. How long did goddamn Mike need? Wes forced his eyes back to the window where flitting sparrows and the sun's shifting angle were his best distraction. The entire morning had been gorgeous, too, even before Mike walked up the driveway and Wes emerged from rifling the chicken coop for fresh eggs. Plumas County, around Quincy anyway, was supposedly too cold for hens, but he and Shar had gotten the hang of it when they'd retired to an old farmhouse on the edge of town. Until then, their local presence had been summers at Rhino, a mining claim up on the next ridge on Mineral Creek that Shar had inherited soon after their marriage. The claim Mike now worked, along with an adjoining one he'd staked out for himself sometime before. They'd met when a bear trashed Shar's family cabin, and Mike, unasked, came over to help with cleanup and repairs. "Where's that truck of yours?" Wes called, cradling the egg basket as Mike advanced. Mike glanced over his shoulder and drew closer. "Up at the claim. Thought I'd hike to town." He wore a watch cap and sturdy boots with a camo jacket and day pack. Bit of a walk, Wes said, knowing it was 4 miles down a rugged canyon, or double that taking the LaPorte Road. How about breakfast? Mike smiled but looked worried. I was hoping you'd ask. The no truck aspect was unusual, but to Shar and Wes, or Wes now, Mike showing up without notice was a welcome diversion. Sometimes he'd just drop off gold for his rent on the claim, or sometimes could be talked into accepting a meal or a shower and shelter from rough weather. And other times would only have a beer and swap stories. Corny as it seemed, Wes even envied how Mike lived the romantic male dream. He could bag a deer, catch trout, find gold when nobody else got much past go. Age-wise, he was 35, well-built, and carried himself in a compact, balanced way like a boxer you'd never land a punch on. At 16, he'd run off from northern Michigan, ridden the rails, and done things to get across the country that he always kept vague. Yet through it all, he'd acquired no visible scars, lost none of his straight white teeth, nor any luster in the chestnut hair that Shar had loved to trim. He was smart, too, and read pretty much anything Wes or Shar, former community college faculty from L.A., would recommend. Inside, the two men sucked on a pot of coffee while Wes prepped one of his potato, egg, ham scrambles and dug hot sauce from the fridge. Not much talking at that point, or as they ate, which was fine. They'd long been comfortable together, and sooner or later what needed to be said would be. Your cupboard well stocked? Mike asked, eyes averted. I might need some stuff. Wes chuckled. Not a problem. What goes? I was going to tell you, except it's hard. Mike, fidgeting with the buttons on his flannel shirt, let out a groaning sigh. I shot Terry Burwell last night.
Okay. I think that might be a really good place to stop, because what happens after that really sets a whole lot of stuff in motion. And it becomes a whole new story arc and a whole new complication to the lives these people are already leading. So my question to you is, at what point did you decide, why did you decide to make this linked short stories rather than a novel? Because it so reads like a novel that it's almost like I'm not even registering that it's linked that it's short stories.
Well, the book arose by accident. I wrote these independent stories and then started to weave them together. The mother and the son, who are the principal characters of Never Ever story, the second story, the one before,
Right.
What I read from, figure then later and weave back in as characters in two of the other stories. And I like the challenge of it, frankly. I feel that, well, results prove it. I'm a much better short story writer than I am a novelist. I've had, now, 30 plus stories, enough that honestly, I've lost count. I don't mean to sound puffed up, but I can't even keep track of where they've all gone now. They're just out there. So it's been a lot of fun and I'm better at it. But the idea of linking them together and yet make them stand alone. 8 of them were published as standalone stories in various magazines. So they do stand alone, but the fact that they also link, but it was just a challenge and it was hard too. At some points, I would have to just get up and walk away and I'll come back tomorrow because I can't figure this out today.
Yeah.
It's super jigsaw puzzle. It's fun though.
Yeah, I had the same question, so I'm glad you asked that, Sue, because I was wondering why not a novel or a novella, because Cass and Mike and Wes and the others, they're all such vivid characters, and when you end off, I was ready to read more about what happens next for Mike and Cass in particular. Obviously, we've got a love story there that's very poignant. I wanted to just ask one question, or maybe it's sort of two. You do really well with female point of view, and you use it.
Well, thank you.
We're in Cass's head some of the time, and we're in Fran's head. It's third person, but still, we're there. So I wonder how you found that compared to your male characters.
I had grave trepidation when I wrote my first female character because I don't believe that women are just simply men with different plumbing. I mean, there's a real difference in sort of attitudes and so on. So, it was a challenge. I forgot even what the first story was. It was in my previous book, whatever it was, where I wrote for my previous story collection, where I wrote some female characters, and they were well received. And I thought, well, okay, I can do this. And I guess it just comes from being just an inveterate people watcher. For years when I worked in downtown Sacramento, I took light rail to work, principally so that I could just study all the people who were my fellow writers, what they were doing. If it's a vice, I'm afraid I have it. It's my vice.
Me too. It's one of life's greatest pleasures is people watching, for sure.
But I'm very gratified to hear you, a fellow writer, say that you found the characters believable as women.
Yeah, I enjoyed both the women. Well, and Ostara, is that how you say it? Ostara,
Yes,
as
yes.
well. They're all very different, and that comes through. So the other question I had, and then I'll turn it back to Sue, was you write a lot about, I guess, what I consider the West. And sort of this fringe area where a lot of the traditions of the West are still there.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular for me, Cass and Mike are like archetypes in a way, Western archetypes that we see in film and story. You have the beautiful girl with the shady past and the heart of gold. What do they call that? The whore with the heart of gold. And, Wes, that part you read, that description, rather Mike, right there, of the rugged, muscled man with his own mind, and he gets himself on the wrong side of the law and has to, scrap his way back with the woman he loves. So there was that sort of epic Western archetype feel to aspects of it, and I wondered what you thought of that.
Well, not by accident, really. I mean, once I decided how I was going to spin this together, but again, both those characters are based on actual people that I knew. One, the character that the person that Wes is based on is a man I knew rather well. I considered him to be sort of an alternate dad of mine. He died in 2008, and I still dream about him. Just a fine man. I knew the Mike character less well, but he always seemed a bit glamorous to me, and so I just played off of that.
Yeah. Maybe that's why the feel of the archetype comes through.
Yeah, I hope so. That part was intentional. Yes.
Yeah.
And once you set out to write a Western, I mean, there's kind of a game you need to play. So.
There is. I was thinking of Gunsmoke, and what is it, Miss Kitty and the guy. What's the guy?
Yeah, right. Well, although my characters have as much in common with Deadwood as Gunsmoke.
Yeah. I haven't seen that, so my references are old black and white TV. Anywho, I'll zip it.
If I can jump in, Dorothy.
Yeah, please.
The other thing that I know a huge amount of that is peppered throughout is this is also in many ways taken as a whole a legal thriller. It's like John Grisham Goes to the Sierra or something like that. I know that's good, right? But I'm wondering how, and it all sounds really, really authentic, Bill, and I'm wondering how come you seem to know this world so well, because it is peppered throughout all these in a very authentic way. How do you know all that stuff?
Well, I'm interested in everything. When I was a teenager, well, at least when I was, say, 13 or 14, I once told my mother that my life's goal was that I wanted to know absolutely everything that there was to know. And but it's true, I actually did. And I even imagined that such a thing was possible. Soon to discover not possible. But nonetheless, I'm kind of interested in everything. I don't have time to be bored. And I've been at it a long time. But I've had some very, very good advisors on legal matters. I do research for my stuff. I consulted a real estate attorney, a mortgage broker. I mean, land fraud is a big, fact, one of the stories.
It is.
So I interviewed several, leading lights in those fields to, get some ideas. Like if you were going to be unscrupulous, how would you do it?
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't know whether you remember a man named Mike Sands, who was at one time a mayor of Sacramento, and Sands Wishick and something where it was his law firm downtown. He's retired to Portland, Oregon now, but he has been my informal legal consultant on any place where I deal with the law. I've had Mike read it, and he's been very, very generous with his time.
I was just wondering if you personally had ever been a practicing attorney.
No, the closest I've been to it is that I volunteered for years to serve on the juries of the moot courts at McGeorge Law School.
Okay.
And although those are moot courts, they handle very interesting cases, and they follow procedures. I mean, the courtroom is so realistic, you could make a movie in there. I mean, really, it looks like a courtroom.
Really? Interesting.
So if you've never been in the building. And I got an awful lot of technique, and they allow you as a juror to stick around while the faculty debriefs the students if you want. Of course, I never left before that was all over, because I wanted to find out the story behind the story. So that helped a lot.
Were you taking notes the entire time? I bet you were.
Oh, yeah, that or just concentrating. Yeah.
In part of one of your biographies, it says you came to writing late in life. So
Yeah,
how did that happen?
Well, it's something I always wanted to do, but I am not the type who would do well in starving in a garret and wondering how I was going to pay my rent, or if the gas was going to be shut off. This is fine for La Boheme, but it's not fine for Bill Pieper. It's not who I am. So I never trusted that I could make a living doing it, and it's the rare writer who really can. I mean, the fact that I've had a bunch of stories published is very nice, and sure, I get royalties, but it doesn't amount to much. It might pay 1 month's rent,
Right, exactly.
So, but I always wanted to do it, and I literally did organize my life so I could retire as young as possible and really pursue this without having to worry whether the rent was paid or not. And so 20 years later, here I am. And I have to say that I've succeeded to a degree that I didn't exactly expect. I mean, I wanted to be in a position where most everything I write gets published, but who can say that's going to happen? But I'm very stubborn. So once I decide to do it, I'll do it.
Are you doing the kind of writing that you always thought you would, or did it morph into something else? Did you write into something?
Well, I did it backwards. I mean, most people start with short fiction and move on to longer things. I sort of had some grand idea of writing novels and discovered belatedly that I was better at short fiction. And I thank Squaw Valley Conference for forcing me to recognize that. Has really allowed me to kind of launch myself. I've been at it 20 years. It takes about 10 to learn how to do a decent job of it, and in the next 10 years, I'm still learning. You are too, of course.
Yeah, exactly. We all are, right?
Yeah, sure. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah. Good. So, what are you working on now?
Almost nothing, because I'm marketing Borders and Boundaries. I have a couple of ideas for stories, and I'm sure that I will write them over the course of the winter. But I had a whole bunch of events canceled. I mean, this is a small thing compared to the grand tragedy of COVID-19. But I had like half a dozen. I had Berkeley events, Reno, Quincy, Truckee, Nevada City. I had events canceled right and left. So I've tried to fill in with that with newsletters and other promo, and this is a wonderful opportunity.
Right.
So thank you so much. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Thanks to Dorothy and Shelley for coming up with this idea. I think it's brilliant. And
yeah, so I'm delighted to be part of it.
Yeah.
And, but I'm sure that I will get, as soon as the weather begins to turn a little bit away from summer, I'll be back into writing mode. And I'm just right now, I've got 2 stories. They're largely written in my head, and I'm just sort of letting them gestate a while.
Let's talk about that process then. That's interesting, because some writers don't have anything in their head, and it just kind of, they start and it happens on the page. Some writers, like it sounds like you, much of the work is done in their head, and then it just spills out, and it's pretty much fully formed. Is that how you?
I don't attempt to write in my head, in the sense that I'm not choosing verbs and nouns and any of that. I do though. I really don't write a story until I have the first sentence is very clear, word for word, including the commas, in my head.
Mm-hmm.
When the first sentence is there, then I'm really ready to go. But otherwise, it's simply concepts. Or in one of the stories I'm planning, a guy is abandoned by his adult daughter, and she's driving a rental car. And in order to be able to have any hope of tracking her down, he has to be able to know what the rental car is. And so I was thinking, how am I going to resolve that? Because she's got the keys, she's got the car, she's gone. And but it occurs to me, well, wait a minute. If he put the car on his credit card, he would have the paperwork. And so he would then be able to report her as a missing person, or mount an effort to find her. So it's details like that. I would rather not, when I'm writing, I'd rather not have to stop or find out the hard way that you've got this hard rock inconsistency that you don't know how to deal with. I'd rather, so that's what I do in turning the story over in my head. Is I look for the logic flaws or the flow. So that's how, that's just simply how my mind works. I don't think there's any one way to do it or any one right way to do it.
No, right. No, one of the things you've discovered clearly, and I think we all do as if we're writing, that your process is always your own. And if someone says you do it this way, it's generally probably not what you're going to do. It's what they do, not you.
Right, and that's why I wasn't going to bring Cass back either. After that story.
Yeah. No, she's an amazing character and key. She's the motivator for a really important part of the arc. So
yeah, I wanted to pick up on what
I have no regrets over bringing her back, but I was.
You were forced to bring her back.
Right.
I wanted to pick up on what you said, Bill, about the challenges of promoting a book during a pandemic and a quarantine. As you mentioned, events canceled, and we've all experienced that. That was certainly part of why we wanted to do these events in June, featuring local authors, but also it just occurred to us Sacramento Stories on Stage and becoming more a resource for the local writing community and the local literary community, and different ways to do that. So that was part of the idea as well, and we appreciate you being part of it. There is so much really going on, and I think just a lot of it thanks to Sue. Over the years, I believe the community here has really grown. There are so many resources for writers.
Yes, very much so. I was always, early in the 2000s, I was always very jealous of poets because they had the Sacramento Poetry Center. And as much as, there's both support and rivalry in something like that. But for fiction writers here, there was really nothing. And I think we tend to be a little more closed off too, because we don't want people stealing our ideas. Once we're working on it, because our stuff takes longer.
The other aspect of fiction writing is that there's so many ways to do fiction, and poetry seems to, you can write all kinds of different kinds of poetry, but it all sort of coalesces as poetry. But you can be a genre writer, you can be a speculative fiction writer, you can be a literary fiction writer, and those all tend to coagulate in their own little groups. Yeah. And so that's one of the wonderful things I love about what Dorothy and Shelley are doing, is that they're really bringing some genre and some nonfiction into Stories on Stage, so that it really does become.
No, that's a good idea. But
or become sort of an umbrella organization for the literary arts, which is
when Valerie Fioravanti had the idea of launching Stories on Stage, very quickly writers coalesced around it.
Exactly.
It became, and because we were also initially the first several years were housed at the Poetry Center as a venue.
Right.
Became like an ancillary poetry center for prose writers, and it really struck filled a need. It really struck a nerve here in Sacramento. And as Dorothy says, it turns out there were a lot more of us than any of us knew.
Exactly. And when Valerie sort of handed it off to me, it was quickly apparent that there was a real pent-up demand for for this. And if you build it, they will come, and they did.
Yeah.
And Dorothy and Shelley are taking it to the next level. So it's really important. But thank you for mentioning the because the origins. It's important.
Mentioning the Poetry Center makes me wonder, obviously one huge difference is they have a location that is identified with the Poetry Center. And so many things can happen when you have a dedicated location. And so in a sense with the online stuff and building on, I know Sue gave several workshops or sponsored several workshops. We're trying to do more of that. If we do these things and kind of cobble together a virtual location, because I don't think we'll ever be in a position to have a physical location. Maybe that's sort of the dream. It's possible, huh?
Absolutely.
Possible. The Clara Center is a nice venue. It's intimate enough, but spacious.
Oh, it's a wonderful venue. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
At a cost.
No, I really do love it, and I miss it.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll be available soon. We don't know yet whether our July events can be physical or will still be.
And even if you have permission to open, there's no guarantee that people will come, in sufficient number to.
Or how you'll have to stage the event. Maybe everyone's got to be 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
I myself am playing it quite cautiously at this stage. I'm an old guy for one thing. Pay attention to that.
Unlike us, I mean, Sue and I are so young.
Other people are they're very eager to be guinea pigs in this experiment, and so I'm willing to let them, and I'm taking a wait and see.
Right. Well, before we close, is there anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up or add or amplify on?
Well, yes, there is. That is more recently, since Borders and Boundaries was wrapped up and kind of going through the editing and all the process that it takes to turn something into an actual book. I've been studying Spanish recently. I've decided I don't want to die, one more monolingual old American. So I'm going to be bilingual by the time, or close to it by the time I'm finished here. So I've been working on Spanish, and I've been in Guatemala twice and to study at language institutes down there. Yeah. So some stories just came kind of flooding over me. So I wrote one, and Red Fez magazine published it right away. And I wrote the other one. They grabbed that, and I had kind of a tacit agreement that if there was going to be a third, and they would publish it. So they did. They published all three, and the stories are titled in Spanish, and they have to do with Americans being in Guatemala.
Right.
But I thought it would be just fun to pull those together. They're already out there. I simply pulled them together as a Kindle book myself, and then I've also made a PDF version that I give to people for free. And so you two were wonderful enough to put it on the Stories on Stage website.
That's right.
And
I didn't kill you.
I dared to do something, that I have a feeling I might get some flack for, but I wrote in the voice of a Black American character, a 40-some-year-old college professor who is in Guatemala on sabbatical working on Spanish. And so I don't know how well I did on rendering the experience or not. I've had a couple of Black friends read it, and they don't hate me. So I guess I didn't. I guess I didn't do too badly. But we'll see in the larger world if I get.
Well, Bill, that's risky, but you should be able to do that.
Well, and also the fact that Red Fez was willing to publish all three.
Yeah, they didn't hesitate.
Obviously, they felt you did a good job.
Well, I came to it from the idea of empathy and respect, not from cultural appropriation. This guy is not so different than I was when I was 40 years old, so it's not a stretch to put myself into his sensibility, and it's certainly not a stretch if you're paying attention at all to realize some of the unique burdens that Black Americans are faced with, just day to day going about their ordinary lives. So, as I said, it came from a position of empathy and respect, and I just thought I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, so true. Well, I'll look forward to reading it. And as you mentioned, looking around your website, I saw that there was a free PDF offered. So that link is on the Stories on Stage website.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. I'm really proud of those stories.
Yeah.
They are quite a departure from anything I've done.
Really?
Yeah.
You want to remind us of your website, because it's Bill Pieper
at authorsden.com.
at authorsden.com.
Yeah, they give you a serviceable website at a reasonable price, and specialize in authors. So there's a lot of tools there that allow you to very easily upload books and images and promotional events and so on.
Yeah, well, there was lots of information there, so encourage folks to have a look, and also, as you mentioned, to go to your Amazon page and
type in my name, and I'm there all over, and I'm easy to find on Google. I'm on Goodreads too. Goodreads, somebody not put borders and boundaries in, and so Goodreads has accepted me as a Goodreads author, and I'm happy.
Absolutely, yeah. So encourage folks to go to Capital Books.
Go to Capital Books. They have this in stock. I bought my copy there on Monday, so they have it.
I was there yesterday. It was on the shelf.
Right. That's right.
I'm very happy to see that they've been a nice addition to our literary community in Sacramento.
Wonderful, yes, and they're now open by appointment, so you can schedule a time. I had a 11:30 appointment and went in, and you can browse a bookstore again, so that was nice. So purchase the books, folks, and after you read it, post a review on Amazon and Goodreads.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like folks to do, Bill?
Well, no, that sums it up. Buy this book.
Great. Well, and I'm I'm interested that you are studying Spanish. I lived for a year in Guadalajara and also in Madrid. So me gustaría practicar contigo alguna vez, si quieres.
Well, I'm now taking weekly tutorials with Casa de Español, the Language Institute in downtown.
I looked into that. Yes.
They're on Zoom now. So.
Oh, wonderful.
My tutor is a very nice young woman, a 31-year-old veterinarian from Veracruz, Mexico.
Nice, yeah. And if you ever start a conversation group similar to a writing group, keep me in mind. I don't have opportunities to speak other than with my sister.
Maybe you and I should do that. That's kind of a cool idea. When life returns to something like we sort of recognize as normal, let's do that.
Yeah, there's also so many wonderful authors, Latin American and Spanish.
Oh yeah.
We could read and talk about, combining both our loves of language and literature.
I discovered a new Colombian writer last year called Alvaro Mutis. I just am intoxicated with the guy.
Yeah.
He was Gabriel Garcia Marquez's best friend, much less, not as well known, except in the Spanish-speaking world. He's quite a major figure, but outside of the Spanish-speaking world, not so well known. But I'm just blown away by his stuff. Way too advanced for me to read in Spanish.
It's interesting to try, though. So I think that wraps it up. Anything you'd like to add, Sue?
When and how will this be broadcast, or when is it you launch it?
Yeah, so we will convert it into a video for YouTube. And when we have that link, we will post it on our website, of course, in a newsletter, and on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, if you want, Sue. And you are, of course, welcome to put it on your website, to send it to all your friends if you have an email list.
Oh, yeah.
So it will live permanently on both the Stories on Stage website and on our YouTube channel.
Okay, so Stories on Stage now has a YouTube channel under the name?
Well, it's got a couple, and we need to merge them, huh, Sue?
That's right, it does. Many.
We have a new one that we started with just so it has the January and March performances, and now it'll have the June interviews. So we have one for 2020, but we need to merge it with the historic videos. So yes, there is a channel.
I'll be interested to see how this comes off. We're all our own and most severe critic, I guess. So I may not be happy, but if the rest of the world is, that's great.
I think it was great. I think
I have one last review bio of Bill that I dug up. This is from the Red Fez site, where
that one. Okay.
I love this one. Okay, Bill and Bill, and you get to have the last word on whether this is actually you. Okay, Bill Pieper is a voyeur and exhibitionist, perfect skills for writing fiction. To inspire novels or stories, he eavesdrops and spies on everyone he encounters, soaking up words, gestures, physical features, and behavioral tropes. Then he writes it down, flips open his raincoat, and exposes the whole sordid lot to as many eyeballs as possible. So far, he has not been arrested for this. Everyone in Northern California in his Northern California haunts agrees it's just a matter of time.
Well, Red Fez, if you become a contributor there, and they publish a lot of my work. They've been very good to me over the years. Red Fez encourages you to write a non-bland profile. In fact, if you write one too bland, they said try again. They'll try again. So this one I just sort of let her rip, and I'm fun. I love that one too. I sent it in elsewhere, and people have said this really isn't appropriate.